Hey JC, thanks for the time, man. I wish we weren't still talking about viruses and vaccines, but we have to. Um, I know the union and the league has tried to incentivize players to get the shot. How do you think that has gone?
Well, I think we'll start from the beginning. We've been trying our best to educate the players and everybody as much as possible, and making sure everybody knows what they need to feel comfortable to make the decision. I've gotten vaccinated, did plenty of research going into it, felt really good about it. But I don't love the word incentives because I think we're just following the science like we have from the beginning. And the changes to the protocols for unvaccinated or for vaccinated players is just that. It's following the science and doing what the research and the data and the science tell us vaccinated players can do based off what the transmission rates are versus unvaccinated players. So I don't love the word incentives because it doesn't feel like that's what we're doing. We're really just following the science and doing what's best and what everybody else is doing and following the CDC guidelines.
Apologies, I probably could have used a better word there.
No, I mean that's not directed at you. Everybody's kind of saying incentives, but I think I think language is important in understanding that this isn't. We're not skipping corners to get guys to get vaccinated. We're just following the science, and that's what vaccinated people are allowed to do in general.
I got you. So what is the challenge now then, JC, within the building where you have vaccinated players and unvaccinated? I know the vaccinated guys now don't have to be tested every day. Is there still an isolation that takes place? Are you still following some of those same protocols that you had to abide to all of last season?
The vaccinated players are pretty open. We don't have to wear masks. We don't have to be tested every day. And then the unvaccinated players still have to follow the same kind of protocols of mask requirements, social distance. So the building still is fitted for COVID, really. So all that stuff's still the same. Our lockers are still spaced out, whether you're vaccinated or not. It's not like one group's crammed into one locker room, the rest is spaced out into different. It's just each group, and then we have some people who have gotten the vaccine, the first dose, so they're on their way to becoming vaccinated. So they're on their way to having the lighter protocols once they become fully vaccinated.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Tom. We'll go to Scott Patrick.
Hey, JC, following up on that, how much benefit do you think there would be for the team if you reach whatever threshold is set, and then protocols are relaxed for the entire team?
Yeah, I don't think I'd have to read through it. I don't think we have a percentage agreed to now or any of the team stuff figured out at this point. I think again, this is an individual decision, but the science is out there now. And there's plenty of people. We have plenty of resources as a union. So anybody who still has questions or concerns, we can get you in touch with our medical team, NFLPA doc, Tom Mayer, who's talked to, I think he said over 200 players already. And then the teams have resources, and we can get you in touch with really any expert you want to talk to about these decisions and these vaccines. So if there are people who are looking for information, looking to make a decision, feel free to reach out to the union or the team. They'll get you in touch with people who can fill you in with whatever questions or concerns you possibly have.
So is it frustrating at all that maybe the numbers aren't as high as people would hope, you would hope?
No, I wouldn't say it's frustrated. Again, it's just these are decisions. I think we're a microcosm of the community, and I think you can look at trends across communities and across the country of where the vaccine rate stands. So I don't really treat us as players any different. We're just people who play football for a living. That's really all it is. So I wouldn't say disappointed or frustrated. It's continue to educate, continue to get guys to feel comfortable with the decisions they make, and understanding what changes come from either decision.
Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. We'll go to Tony Grossi.
Hi, JC. How effective was the boycott of OTAs in your opinion?
Again, I'll say language is important. We never used the word boycott. That was kind of used by other people. I don't think you can boycott a voluntary program. So when it comes to how successful it is, I think anytime as a union you educate your membership on what their rights are under the CBA, whether that's a win or whatever, I think that's positive. And then when you have I think over 2/3 of teams negotiate with their players for better language and better rules and better working conditions than what's in the CBA. I think that's extremely positive. I think that's a win. Our goal and our hope is to make the offseason better. We know that the vast majority of players realize and understand that the offseason is kind of an archaic model, and it's not in the best interest of health and safety of the players. And I think you see that when these teams agreed to walkthroughs only, sandals for walkthroughs, no helmets, no competitive periods, less time on the field, no meetings, less weeks, canceled mini camps. Those are all positive things for players. So I would say that's a win. And then the fact that over 2/3 of coaches kind of agreed that the normal offseason program wasn't necessary and they are willing to cancel weeks or change the tempo. I think that's them saying, you want to know what? Yeah, these off-season programs have gotten out of hand. We don't need you here all this time, and we don't need to kill you guys out in the practice field and get guys hurt. So it seems like the coaches are kind of at least aware of the issues at hand. And then if we want to talk about success, I think this was the first time in a long time players felt like they actually had a choice. And I think we created an environment that allowed guys to make a clear, honest decision of whether they should. And I think that's the real question. I know a lot of people talk about, well, what was this about? I think the question everybody has to ask themselves as players is this worth your time to volunteer to come to these practices? And that could be, early on, it was the COVID was still an issue and still is an issue. The protocols weren't in a good spot for players. They're going to be too burdensome on the players. And then it comes to, is it worth my rest, my recovery, where I like working out, being with my family? Is it worth leaving those things to come to the facility? And we had some guys who said yes and some guys who said no, but that's the decision that every player should be able to make because it's a voluntary program. So I would think it's a successful. I think this is going to continue because if I'm one of the teams that agreed to only go in for 2 weeks, I can't imagine next year if the coach said we're going to do 9 weeks that they're going to like that idea. If I was a player who didn't go in and like last year felt really good all season, felt like I had less miles on the tires, I don't see that really changing. And I think the teams that went in and didn't negotiate and didn't make changes, we've seen a handful of those teams violate the CBA. And I think those players are now realizing that unless they start getting some assurances from their clubs, they probably shouldn't go anymore. And I think this was a reminder of those teams that what OTAs are like when you don't have an agreement with your team, they're going to take care of you. So in the end, if for the next 9 years, it's going to be 32 teams doing 32 different things, but they're all better than what's in the CBA, I think that's great for players.
Hey, JC, do you think players should have a say-so in training camp practices and joint practices, or is that a line you don't wish to cross?
A say-so, what do you mean by say-so?
In a discussion, a conversation with your coaches that maybe you could lighten it up a little bit more in training camp?
But I think that's something that we as a union are working with the NFL on learning from what we did last year. Again, I think a lot of that science is pretty clear that we can continue to build and be better in training camp and ramp up the right way. I think the ramp that we had last year was very successful. And I think the joint panel of our experts agree with that the ramp, both in duration and intensity, is an important aspect. So I think we continue to build on that. But again, the injury issue gets put into a player issue only, but the teams want their players healthy, the fans want their players healthy, and obviously the players want to be healthy. So it's something that we should all be working on to make sure guys can play at a high level, both this year and into the future for as long as they feel like it and not get worn out and beat down before they should be.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tony. Jeff Shadell, you're up. Jeff, go ahead.
Do you think it took COVID, JC, to open your eyes to this new approach? And the second part of the question is, do you think you need more than 1 year of data to prove that the lighter OTAs really do affect the injury rate?
Well, I think players in general knew that the offseason programs were getting out of hand, and the intensity was being ramped up and becoming more and more dangerous. And so I think what COVID did was allowed us to see and both feel what the change would be like, and the data I think reflects that we were healthier last year. But I also think when we talk about sample size, you got to even take account, I know it's not great, but anecdotal evidence too, where I think most of the guys, when you think of last year and all the things we had to deal with COVID, like the rest of the world, and how much of a mental and physical drain the protocols and the rules and kind of that everyday anxiousness was, and for the vast majority of our players to still leave last season after all that and be like, honestly, I still feel mentally and physically fresher after that season. I mean, you got to take into account that that's how players are feeling. So even if you only have one year of statistics on a lighter off season, the players know how their bodies feel. We're very in tune with that, and when the vast majority are saying that that little wear and tear that we get rid of by getting rid of the off season, that makes our bodies feel significantly better by the end of the season. That's good, and that's what we fight for.
Thanks, Jeff. Nate Ulrich, you're up.
Hey, JC, I know you look at the big picture as NFLPA president, but kind of focusing in on the Browns, it's a little bit unclear what kind of changes were made. And, if you had negotiations with Kevin Stefanski, what the results were. I know obviously the first week of OTAs wasn't like the regular on-field practices. And then there were 2 weeks of OTAs. The starting offense basically stayed away. So how did it go talking with Kevin Stefanski about all this? And do you think that the changes, that the Browns made were satisfactory? And can you explain them?
Well, I think what we did really well was we had really good communication throughout, both player to player and coach to player. So I wouldn't really classify anything as a negotiation with what we did. Kevin came to us with his plan, laid out. We had never had an off season with Kevin, so we don't know how Kevin usually holds off season program. And Kevin laid out our plan, especially to the leadership and the older players, asked some questions, just clarifications. And then after that, we let everybody know that this is a decision that each individual player is going to make. We're not telling anybody they can't go. We're not telling anybody they have to go. This is a voluntary program. And like I said earlier, you make the decision on what you feel is right. And we made it clear to everybody when we get back here in person for mandatory stuff, you got to be ready to go. And if you feel like you're going to be more ready to go by staying where you're at, training where you're at, and doing it on your own time, then do that, because that's better for the team. And if you feel like you want to be in the building and doing things here, and that's going to make you ready to go when we get to mandatory stuff, then do that. And there was no, I don't think, pressure to do either. It was just do what you think is in your best interest, and that was it. So we know the type of guy Kevin is in this organization, so we knew he wasn't going to kill us, or he was going to have a pretty good program put into place. So once we saw it, it was just each person's decision under the CBA that they can either volunteer to go or volunteer not to go.
And did you have any, obviously you stayed away, and virtually the entire starting offense stayed away, and that's your right, as you've explained and emphasized this off season. But did you have any qualms about teammates who did show after you guys put out that statement saying you'd exercise the right not to attend?
No, a bunch of guys reached out to me just to talk through it, and I told them, like, this is your decision. I'm here if you have any questions, but if you feel like it's in your best interest to be there, be there. I don't think there's any pressure, or I'm definitely not mad at anybody for coming. I think we laid that out very clearly. We had our own calls with just players that we can talk about it just as a group, and we made it. And we made it really clear that we're a team, and there are no hard feelings either way. For the guys that came in and the guys that stayed away, there should be no hard feelings for the guys that stayed away. and vice versa. The guys that came in shouldn't be upset. The guys stayed away. This is each person's making their decision that they feel is going to make them the best player. And if we all make that decision and all become back as the best players possible, then the team's better because of it.
All right, we're going to take two more. Mary Kay Cap, Scott Petrick.
Yeah, JC, I've got two questions I wanted to ask here. And I kind of asked these on the NFLPA call the other day, but I want to get your thoughts on them if possible. The first one involves the CDC calling for an emergency meeting this coming Friday on the increased incidence of myocarditis in young men, specifically mostly between the ages of, like, I think it's 16 and 30 is the area of concern, which kind of covers most of your membership. So my question about that is, with this ongoing investigation of the CDC and an emergency meeting coming up on Friday, what is the message to your players right now about getting the vaccine?
I haven't seen that, or I'm not sure if I've seen the exact CDC memo that you're talking about. I did see one that I think still said that they would strongly advise everybody to get the vaccine. I'm not sure if that's the same memo, but I would have to read the vaccine. And again, those are the things I've unfortunately had to learn more about this virus and the study of it than I probably ever would have wanted to, but I'm not the expert. And that's why if there are guys with questions, I would direct them to Tom Mayer to answer those, because I'm not one to speak about the science or anything like that. That's well beyond my pay grade and expertise.
Okay, fine. I mean, they called for the meeting last Thursday and it's coming up this coming Friday. So anyways, I just figured with it covering, most of the age group of your membership that, that a lot of you guys might have questions about what they should.
I'll try to go find that memo to read through it. I have not seen that.
Okay. Then the second one is from the Cleveland Clinic study that came out last Thursday. And it basically, the conclusion of the study was that people who have been vaccinated, I'm sorry, people who have recovered from COVID are not receiving any discernible benefit from then getting vaccinated. So my question to you then would be, if you guys believe this study, or if you want to deal with this study, and I think there's a similar study in the Lancet right now, that natural immunity is as good as vax immunity, or maybe even better in some cases. My question then is, would you guys as a union argue for, I think there have been 266 players or so that suffered from COVID or tested positive for COVID last year. Would you argue that those players should also receive some of the loosening of restrictions, since they have the same immunity or maybe even better immunity than the vax people? Should they not have to get tested every day? Should they not have to be quarantined and those sorts of things?
I would have to read that, and still, even if I do read that, I would definitely check with our medical experts on the best way they feel to handle that. I haven't read that study, so I think it's tough for me to make a decision or a recommendation off that hypothetical / just a scenario I haven't seen yet. So I'd have to get back to you very quick.
And our final question will go to Scott Petrick.
Hey, JC. Jed said that you and some of the other linemen got together to work out. I think he said at T3. Is that something you've done in the past? And do you find benefits to just getting together with guys, even if it's casual in the off season?
Yeah, I think we worked out together. A lot of it was just lifting and some drills. It was just kind of normally what we would do during the off season anyways. And then I was out in San Diego for the last 2 weeks. Antonio was out there with me. That's usually where I spend my off seasons as is. So I went out there just to work out and get to the beach a little bit. But a lot of it's just, for my personal decision on the matter, it was really, I know if I go to OTAs at this point, there's really only two things that can happen. One, I'm going to have more wear and tear on my joints. That's not great for me. And two, I have an increased likelihood for a season-ending injury by practicing right now. So both those things aren't good for me, and I would say not good for the team with either of those. I've been somebody who have never felt that OTAs have been helpful for me at any part of my career, taking away the injury I had during it. But I feel when you're in shorts and a t-shirt, I think your fundamentals slip more than you develop your fundamentals in offensive lineman, because you can't really put your shoulder into anybody or you're going to get clipped by a face mask. So you play high, the defense is able to grab your jersey and pull you. You have nothing to grab onto because they don't have shoulder pads. So I think it's not a realistic game-like scenario. And I've always felt worse leaving the off-season program, both physically and with my fundamentals, than entering the off-season program. So for me, it was a fairly easy decision. You know, if I know I'm going to be more banged up leaving and I have a higher likelihood of getting hurt, and I don't think I'm going to get much benefit when it comes to fundamentals going through it. There's not much to gain when I can train and get stronger, and I can actually train longer when I'm not practicing every day. I can go and work out longer and do more things to come back in better shape. Did you get to play Torrey Pines with the U.S. Open setup? I did not, but I would be incapable of, and I would not subject myself to the disaster that would go through if I was out there. Fair enough. Thanks.